So good morning. Good morning and welcome to the 2017 Building Energy Summit.
Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
So you'll notice things have changed a little bit in the last 6 years. Good morning. My name is Darlene Pope. I'm a Senior Vice President at JLL, and I lead our Smart Building program. You'll notice that the last slide in there, we slipped a little word in front of Building Energy Summit this year. You're going to see a very common theme throughout all of the sessions, throughout all of our speakers, and that's the addition of smart into energy management. We've seen a huge transition over the last 10, 15, 20 years from when smart buildings were buildings that had high-speed internet access to now a very strong focus on data and analytics, worker productivity, health and wellness. We've come a tremendous long way in the last 20 years, and so very excited to have to be able to welcome you to our new Smart Building Summit. I want to thank, there's so many people that I need to thank and recognize before we get started, but I do want to start off with a safety moment. So Bob Best, if you're in the room, I'm doing my job here. So starting off with our safety moment from JLL, I'd like to let you know in the event of an emergency, you will see the exits located on either side of the stage and exits in the back of the room. Safety moment for the day. Also, please, no texting and walking. That can be very dangerous. You can bump into people. If you're seen texting and walking, you will be fined. And at the end of the session, we will give an award to the most applicable person who's been able to follow all of our safety rules. So please, no texting and walking. I want to tell you a little bit about the journey that we've taken over the last 5 or 6 years. So some of you have known me throughout the industry. I've been in the industry now for about 25 years. Started off as a property manager here in Washington, D.C. For Charles E. Smith. And over the years, back in the 90s, I was very involved in the telecom business. Some of you who are here today, I actually worked with literally 18, 20 years ago when we were first putting high-speed internet access into buildings. And back in 2000, I started a company called Core Advisors. And Core Advisors was a consulting firm working with real estate owners to help them through this technology transition. And I'm very fortunate and very excited to say that JLL acquired that company in 2015. And I'm pleased that I'm now in a position to be able to lead the Smart Building program for JLL. So I feel that, I just got goosebumps. I feel that my career has really come to a pinnacle, and this is just, I want to thank JLL for the opportunity to lead this for them. Our theme this year is Reimagine, as you saw by the opening statements, by the opening video. We're encouraging you to really reimagine the way that buildings operate, reimagine what we can do with the workplace, reimagine, every time you go into a building and you look around at things and you just say, you know what, that's just not smart. How do we do this better? How do we take advantage of today's technology and just reimagine the way we do business, the way we interact with our employees, reimagine the way that we run buildings? I want to talk a little bit about our program. We've got 15 educational sessions. We've got our 2 plenaries. We have a phenomenal keynote speaker, Joe Allen from Harvard University, that's going to be talking about the impact of the indoor environment on cognitive function and productivity. And again, that same theme around employee engagement, productivity, and health and wellness. So I encourage you to attend as many of the educational sessions today as you can. So with that, I want to start off by thanking our sponsors. Without our sponsors, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be able to have the wonderful luncheon and reception. One of our platinum sponsors is JLL, so I do want to thank JLL for your sponsorship. Also, United Technologies, Philips. I want to thank Philips also for their sponsorship of the Advisory Council dinner tonight and for the opening general session. I want to thank Yardi for their platinum sponsorship, and also TCMA, the Ronald Reagan Building. So thank you very much to our platinum sponsors. I also want to recognize all of our gold sponsors. And all of these sponsors are not only contributing financially, but in terms of thought leadership, each of these companies has a table in the Resource Pavilion, and I really encourage you to stop by and learn who they are and what they do. Because these are the technology companies that are driving the revolution. They're the ones that are helping us to transform our buildings into high-performance, smart, intelligent, data-driven facilities. So please make sure you stop by and meet each of these sponsors and learn what they do and how they're contributing. And I also want to thank our green sponsors. Next, I want to take a moment to thank our advisory council. So would all of our advisors please stand and be recognized? These are some of the most forward-thinking thought leaders. Please stand, advisors, please stand, thank you. Many of these advisors have been with us for 6 out of the last 6 years, so thank you very much to those of you who keep coming back year after year. You see that we have a very wide range throughout the industry, representation from real estate, hospitality, retail, government. We've really selected a very broad range of advisors and thought leaders to help us shape the program, select the speakers, and really drive the summit every year. So thank you so much to all of our advisors. Just a brief list of all the companies that are represented here today. And we're very proud that we get a very broad representation from across the industry. Again, throughout real estate, government, vendors, consultants. Year after year, we continue to see so many people coming in to learn from each other, to collaborate, to share best practices and case studies. So please also take time to meet your neighbors, collaborate, share stories. Together we can learn from each other and take it to the next step. So please make sure you brought lots of business cards and have the opportunity to meet a lot of the attendees that are here today. And with that, I'd like to once again recognize Philips for their sponsorship of the webcast for our opening general session. We are broadcasting live. Those of you who are tweeting, we are hashtag BES 2017 and at BLD Energy Summit. So please feel free to tweet throughout the entire program. I do want to thank Philips and recognize Stacy Gillen from Philips, who's going to say a few opening words. Stacy?
Good morning, and thank you, Darlene, for that warm welcome, and thank you to JLL also for the opportunity to be here. Myself, probably like most of you, have an opportunity to travel quite a bit for the course of our work. We get to engage in lots of great conversations, whether it happens to be the individual sitting next to you on the plane or who you're meeting with in your destination. But we get those informal and formal conversations. And yesterday, as I was making the trek here, I was thinking, what is really resonating as I think about reimagining the future of work, reimagining what we can do when it comes to now the smart building tied to energy as well. Very importantly, I found, really 3 themes that were coming together. An individual saying, what can I do with the limited resources, so that comes up all the time, the limited resources both in individuals and our human capital, but also dollars, what can I do to ensure that we are driving more efficient buildings, more sustainable buildings, and now, as the theme of today's conference alludes to, how do we have smarter buildings? It really was those 3 things that I think, I'm so excited about today and what we will all share together. And people then say, okay, so you work for Philips Lighting, so why lighting? What can you do? What can lighting do to help me with those 3 priorities? And so very fortunately for me, lighting is everywhere. It is ubiquitous. It is in everywhere we sit and where we are. It impacts life in such a tremendous way. We have made such progress over the last decade with the evolution of LED technology that there's such tremendous gains not only in energy efficiency, but very importantly, this notion of how do you transform now this lighting infrastructure to a really robust information pathway. this lighting infrastructure now can become a conduit that drives information like we could not imagine. So we have the capacity to collect data, analyze that data, and make smart decisions with that data. It's all around driving now what can be space optimization, or importantly, the employee experience. So the real estate world is a perfect microcosm of this that exists. You have these infrastructures, and the question is, are you doing all that you can with that existing infrastructure? So with the framework of today's conference, so reimagine the future of work, reimagine it now with a connected lighting solution that is more efficient, and it is more sustainable, and it is smarter. So one of the large commercial real estate service firms recently conducted a global survey of 500 corporate real estate executives. This report found that there is an intensifying demand on all of you to align with the corporate strategic priorities. And what does that mean? It really means, how do we enhance the productivity of the current real estate portfolio and where we want to grow? So brand new construction obviously offers you tremendous opportunities, right? Clean slate. You can design in all of the infinite possibilities of technology that can drive that smart building for you. But I know many of you, and I know it's a major challenge for our nation in particular, is what do you do with those existing spaces? You have the challenge of really legacy infrastructure. You oftentimes need to renovate your space and retrofit your space during current business. That's a challenge. So you have to actually keep that business continuity very, very important and near and dear to your plans. Employee expectations are rising. So employees are actually working for companies that are focused in these particular spaces. Cost has to be minimal. Right? The payback has to be fairly short, and it's really important. And then last but not least, installation has to be fast. The intensifying pressure on delivering on your return on investment, and actually the bar is being raised higher and higher every quarter for where really strategic funds are being put for investment. At the same time, you may be finding that you're involved with organizations that are going through massive mergers and acquisitions that leaves you with a hodgepodge of buildings across this country or across the world that don't have any consistent or standardized infrastructure. There was a Harvard Business Review article that actually stated of that potential that we can go and gain, only about 2% is being captured now for the positive. So the opportunity here is massive. So how do we take advantage of this opportunity and keep all of your stakeholders engaged and really not straining already your existing resources? And then you ask, like I said earlier, so why lighting? Well, it is so tangible. Lighting is so fundamental to how people see, both when you have really good lighting and also when you have poor lighting. And it is one of those pieces, I think as Darlene mentioned too, around health and wellness that is so vitally important as we move forward. It's efficient. So just by simply upgrading an existing infrastructure to LED, you can immediately recognize 50% energy savings. Then wrap on top of that smart controls, and you can increase that savings by an incremental 20 to 40%. So it's pretty compelling on why to move. And it's fast. So the cool thing now with the onset of digital technology is that it can be fast. It can be seamless with connected wireless technologies where you can come in and actually retrofit your space in a simple and fast way. So with advancements in digital lighting, as I mentioned before, around how do you take your building infrastructure that's already there and make it smart and make it work for you? There are so many sensor-type technologies now that can collect all sorts of data. So imagine, if you will, that every light point you have in your building now is equipped with a sensor. You can actually then drive things around occupancy and really fine-tune your building. You can give benefit back to your tenants that, as we'd like to say at Phillips, that is well beyond the value of illumination. cloud-based technologies now. As you're managing large real estate portfolios, imagine cloud-based dashboards that give you visibility to your entire portfolio and the ability to actually control that portfolio from the cloud. These data-driven insights are what are so important to the future of how we work. It will give you intelligence that you never thought you had before from an occupancy and an energy management standpoint. And in addition, people cost. So there's been the World Green Building Council stated that about 90% of basically the heaviest cost that we all have is people. It's also our greatest asset at the same time. And so when you look at the edge, and I know we talked a lot about the edge last year as well here, they now are seeing that it is now their cheapest office space that they have, according to OVG. And what's really important is they have seen 4 times the number of applicants wanting to work in that building. So it's serving multiple purposes. So some of you might be saying, okay, the edge is fabulous, but I have my own share of challenges. That was certainly some new construction. What can you do to help me? So the nice thing now is not only is technology changing, but the way we do business is changing. So business models are changing. So imagine, if you will, the notion of these subscription-based models, things like maybe Spotify, where you actually just have a subscription-based service. You can do that now as well with lighting. So where you're struggling with capital expenditures, why not, with one simple agreement, have everything taken care of? From a very easy business case that could be presented to your leaders to get buy-in for your project, all the way through the auditing, the installation, the maintenance, and the ongoing service. So at this pace of innovation, and as it continues, where and when we work, it's certainly super exciting to imagine what the future of our workplace will look like. And I'm sure that, at this point, none of us really know what it's going to be, but I can tell you from the vantage point of Philips Lighting, I know that the future is incredibly bright. So I want to thank you so much for your time this morning and the opportunity to stand here with you. If you are interested, as Darlene mentioned, we do have a table out in the atrium. Be happy to discuss further any projects or just exchange and dialogue and mutually learn. So thank you so much, and Darlene, I'll give it back to you.
So just for the record, yes, we do talk a lot about the edge. JLL currently has 2 projects underway that I can't talk about yet. They're going to be better than the edge, so just wait till next year. One other person I definitely want to recognize is Doug Sharp, who's with us today. Doug is the President of Corporate Solutions for JLL Americas. So Doug, could you just stand? Just want to introduce Doug. Doug's the reason I'm here in the first place, so thank you. And next, I want to introduce our keynote speaker and then our keynote panel. So opening for us today is Greg O'Brien. He's the CEO for JLL Americas, Chief Executive Officer. In this capacity, he has overall responsibility for the Americas business. He leads the Americas Executive Committee, which sets the strategic direction for JLL Americas. Greg is also a member of the firm's Global Executive Board, and he sits on the Diversity and Inclusion Council for the Americas. Greg?
Thank you, Darlene, and good morning, everyone. I'm going to need this. Well, thanks for everybody for getting up early today and coming in. I think it's going to be a great conference. I thought Stacy's comments were excellent, starting to vision some endpoints and ways we can actually get to solutions. But today, I really want to talk about a couple of things and just give you a little bit of a context. JLL, obviously, we're very active with occupiers. Many of the largest corporations work with us on the occupier side, and then we also work a lot with the largest investors. So we sit a little bit with a perspective of both sides, and I'm very much looking forward to the panel where we have a number of owner representatives and then the largest tenant in the world in GSA, and we'll be able to dialogue around a number of different things. We're at we're at a place right now in time, and I think this is true whenever you've lived, when the pace of change is increasing. But I really do think it's faster than it's been, certainly in our lifetimes. And that really forces us all to absorb a lot. And what we're talking about today, really a journey around buildings and around how they affect people, really is an accelerating place, and a place that's kind of fun to be in the middle of. I know for all of you, whether you're consultants or product providers, owners who are looking for how they can apply this and get to their ROI and other things, or you're an occupant and you're looking for how you can affect your overall business. So let's go back a couple of years and think about what this event was 6 years ago. Darlene and I were talking before. People got 12 pages stapled together, and it was really all about how do we get to energy efficiency. And that really has, the dialogue around that really has changed. I really think of that as foundational to what you all are doing and what our clients on both sides of the table are doing. It's really migrated, and I'm going to talk a little bit today about that journey. And then I'm going to spend a little time also talking about the future of work. And we take our largest occupant clients, who ultimately drive the ROIs in a lot of the commercial buildings. They've come together, about 15 of them, on our client advisory board, and really helped us think about what pressures they really feel. And you'd think, well, we should know that. But really get away from talking about individual services and the things we all do, and start talking about the pressure areas to give us a context. And that's really what the future of work is. You have a copy of the plenary. We just brought this out really last week, but you have a copy of it in front of you. And I'll talk about it as a construct, because maybe it helps us as we think about what this journey is. You know, today, and I'm gonna talk about it, it's not just energy, it's really about how do we get to building efficiency, and then more importantly, how do we get to the human experience and really the productivity of people, which buildings are really, at the end of the day, there to be a vehicle to accelerate that human experience for everybody's individual impact, and then how can we get more out of them for the businesses, not just as a business, as our investor clients are thinking about. So one way we think about it is a construct we call 330-300, and Kevin was saying before, it wasn't too long ago, we probably would have called it 110-100. And if you're in New York, they're much bigger numbers. But the context to that really is as follows: 3 in your average building, and there is no such thing, but 3 in your average building might be the energy cost. So one of the first things that this group came together around, and many of you thinking about, is how do I attack that energy cost? And then, of course, other utilities and things. The 30 is really how do I go after the rent side? And this is efficiency and how can I get more out of my space? And we've all seen the size of offices change, and I've been in the business for almost 30 years, and you look at the square footage per professional and how that's dropped over time. But now it's much more about how we're using space. Most of our corporate clients use each individual space less than 50% of the time, whether it's a conferencing facility or an individual desk, so that we're getting into lots of ways that we use space that really drive how do I get more value out of each square foot, which then will allow for our investor clients, if I can find a way to get there, then it'll allow them to actually pay more rent, because really what our clients are thinking about is what is the cost per employee, the cost per producer of what they have. And that's been a migration, and that's been a journey we've been on for a long time, and many of you have too. But the real prize here at the end of the day is how do I elevate my human capital? And 300 is a rough estimate on average of what the cost of human capital is per square foot in buildings. Darlene and I were talking before about a large financial services company who's in a primary market, and their cost per square foot on human capital is over $600 a foot. So when we are talking to the C-suite, what they want is really to start on the right side here. Take me to the 300, and let's have dialogues over how we can make them more productive. One of the interesting things about commercial real estate after the great financial crisis, almost all commercial real estate heads were reporting into the CFO. For obvious reasons, it's one of the highest costs. Today, the migration is almost complete, including in our company. the CRE function now reports in and partners much more tightly with HR, because the math of this really is, it's about how we help our people get more from themselves and out there for the company. So let's take a look at this evolution again. Again, we started with smart buildings, then we really moved to that smart workplace. So Darlene said she'd give me a bonus for every time I said the word smart today. So I'm trying to rack it up early. And then really to smart experience. And I'll give you a couple of examples. We were recently engaged by McDonald's, and they came in and said, I really want you to help us with a smart building strategy using our words. We started working on that and started dialoguing with them about what others are doing and benchmarking, and immediately it went to smart workplace. And as we're dialoguing about smart workplace, and they're asking the question that every client asks, what else are people doing? We immediately moved right up to smart experience and a discussion of the whole impact on what's going on. We're working with Genentech right now as one of many examples, and that entered through smart workplace. Really looking at how do we get efficient and effective. If I'm only using my individual workspaces 55% of the time, what techniques can I use, which is going to be around automation, and it's going to be around mobile applications that are going to allow me to use space, collaborate better. What things can I do? And with my goal really being, how do I bring my teams together to collaborate at a different level? We're early in that engagement with them, and immediately they're also looking across this spectrum. And then some of our largest clients, and one of the industries that's had to embrace a lot of this faster because of the cost pressures and regulation and other things is the banking industry. They also tend to be, the larger ones, very global. HSBC, large client of ours, and they really started at Smart Experience, because to them, the table stakes are really the earlier pieces, really getting to energy efficiency, staying at the edge of that. So they're very interested in all of your products and how we can incrementally get them there, because they're not starting at zero. But we also have many clients that are starting at zero and they come in, but it's amazing how agile they are at moving across these different perspectives. So why would we really want to optimize all this? If you're a CEO, CFO, COO in a big company, and those are the folks that I spend a lot of time talking with, they want to know, how's it going to impact my bottom line? So we'll talk a lot about ROI and other things later, but how's it going to impact my bottom line? The reality is the best places to work, so companies that are rated great places to work, they outperform in the stock market the other companies by 3x. So these are very real metrics. So as you see companies being named, I'm very proud that in the cities that we're in, almost universally, we're named the best place to work. What that means is our attrition is lower. And it means that we're able to bring teams together because they have a little more time. We have a diversity of perspectives. We want to be a fantastic place to work because that's the best way for us to drive outsized value for clients. Clients continue to come back, your client turnover rate is lower, and then you deliver really good performance, which at the end of the day to the C-suite is a very important part of what their board needs them to do, in addition to sustainability and the other issues. So let me talk just for a second about future work. We broke this down and at various times as we were going through the many ways we could talk about the pressures we see today, and trying not to use very specific things like our facilities management business or our project development services business. We came up with probably 20. It's been a lot of different iterations, but the latest iteration, again, this is heavily informed and shaped by our top 15 or 20, many of them global clients. The financial performance and operational excellence piece you see in red at the bottom, that used to be what a lot of our businesses were about. That's absolutely table stakes for our clients. Whether it's there aren't many first-generation outsourcers at this point in the corporate world, but the expectation is you're going to be excellent at those, and you need to be, and they want to see us continuing to move down that spectrum. But the three areas, and I'll talk about them briefly now, that they really want to talk about more is the human experience. How can I help that 300 get a lot better? The digital drive. The real move, this is everything from IoT to automation of other areas to artificial intelligence. How can I integrate that all? And then the last one, continuous innovation. I need to be looking at some of these things that are out there, the virtual realities and other things like that. I need to be starting to think about how I can integrate them today as examples, and then tomorrow they're going to be a big part of how we actually operate at the end of the day. So why did we come up with these 5 and why this construct? The answer is when we bring this to CEOs and CFOs, certainly to our CRE community, they say, this is what I'm hearing from our board and from our senior executives. These are the ways, broad buckets, that people are talking to me. I need you to come to me in this way. And at the end of the day, once you shape what their strategies are and you can help them get there, it eventually turns into the types of services and goods that those in this room and others have. But don't come to me with individual services or your integrated solutions. Talk to me about my problems, and these are my problems. And none of these should be a surprise, I'm sure, to anybody in the room. So the human experience is really about how we help people collaborate better. Joe Allen's going to talk more about the environmental effects on people and their ability to think better, how we're able to work with them, with our teams, to be able to find them different ways they work. In reality, my dad was with the same company for 37 years, had the same office, everybody had an office. We don't operate that way anymore. And I can tell you the next generation definitely doesn't. We move between different spaces, sometimes quiet spaces, collaboration spaces, and then we need to think about things like natural light and other resources, and the outcomes of that, and Joe will talk about that in science a little bit more, really get us to attacking that 300 in some way. And it can sound abstract, but the reality is when you do it right, it really, really does have an impact, and it needs to be driven by the occupiers. For our building owners, we really need to be receptive and flexible in what we have, and I know that's what a lot of you in this room today are helping with. Digital Drive, there are 1.3 billion devices connected today. By 2020, it's 20 billion. So basically, any data, to the extent that you as a company want to gather it, there are ways to do it. And once you have that data, then the real question is, and we have a number of clients who wanted to have lots of sensors and gather all the data. Now they're getting to the point where they're having to go to the next level, hire the data scientists and others to provide insight from that data. Because the data actually will do absolutely nothing for you. But what will do something is, here's the information, here are the tools. Now you can make faster, smarter business decisions. Continuous innovation. I sit on our digital board as well. It's amazing how many things are going on in prop tech, how many great products companies like the ones in this room are coming up with, and we're trying to digest them all the time. How do we absorb those into the strategies that we have so they can actually have impact for clients? And you need to be thinking about what that, and you're thinking about how to get in. We're helping companies think about how do we look at those and then get to real examples. And I'm sure we'll talk about some of those on the panel later. Sometimes the button works and sometimes it doesn't. There we go. Oh. So the future of all of these things really is today. We have clients that really run across a spectrum from, I'm just trying to get into the entry level of, I really haven't managed my energy, I'm starting to think about workplace, to what's on the bleeding edge, how are we going to be able to do more that's going to make us more productive, lower the attrition of our people, make for a better life for our people, and continue to let us perform, whether it's in the stock market, socially as a socially responsible company. And it's a really fun place to be as we sit at the center. I'm very much looking forward to our panel and to dialoguing with the others. I'm going to turn it back to Darlene now, and she'll get us kicked off.
So let me introduce the rest of the panelists. If you could please join us on the stage. So we have Kevin Kamshore, who's Director of High Performance Buildings for GSA. Caverly Garrett, Executive Director for Real Estate Asset Management for JP Morgan. And John Gilbert, who's the COO and EVP, Executive Vice President for Rudin Management Company from New York. John. Please welcome our panelists. So our discussion today, we've got several different owners and managers, owners and occupiers represented in our panel today. So we've got a very broad perspective to discuss reimagining the future of work and reimagining where we are in the industry today. So John, I'm going to start with you. We talked about in the 90s, a smart building was a building that had high-speed internet. And I know you were also very active in that space back with 55 Broad Street. Talk to us a little bit about what you've seen changed over the last 20 years, and where do you think we're going in the future?
Well, it's a lot of the things that were just talked about in terms of really focused on the human condition. We used to, chemistry and physics are obviously two key hard sciences that we use to run our buildings, but increasingly it's sociology and biology. It's really focused on, okay, what is that human experience? How do I keep that tenant? And I think what, Steve Jobs said it best, technology is nothing. It's really about what people do with it. We talk about big data. Well, guess what? All of our buildings collect an enormous amount of data every single day. But at the end of the day, we dump it and we don't look at it. So what we saw as the most important thing is actually creating memory within buildings, creating innate intelligence. So the data that we collect today will be remembered, learned from, and help influence our actions tomorrow.
So Kevin, as we mentioned, a tremendous amount of data coming out of these buildings. What's changed at GSA? How are you managing this new data-driven environment?
I think the biggest thing that's changed, and it started probably a decade ago, is we don't dump the data at the end of the day. We have been, we finished, I guess, at the end of the Recovery Act, we got over 90% of our electricity use on advanced meters. And I remember, 20 years ago, we were talking about whether installing an advanced meter was an energy-saving device, because it doesn't save energy, it just measures it. But it's what you said earlier. It's what you do with the energy. We have connected buildings together. We've gotten huge efficiencies from trying to analyze the data on a central basis rather than building by building by building. You can afford the higher priced talent. You can see trends that are happening in one building that are affecting other buildings. You see outliers in ways that you can't otherwise see. And then we've moved really towards integrated systems in the building, not just having an independent building automation system and an independent lighting system and an independent security system and so on, to try and really meld those together. And some of our buildings, our headquarters buildings, in fact, is a great example. It's outperforming its goal by over 15% in terms of energy, its design goal. And that's a rarity, because usually the design goal we miss by about 20% overall. So I think that's it. The big problem, I think, that's still there is how do we really incorporate the tenant into the thinking about how the building should operate, because it really should operate the way the tenants want, not the way we building professionals think they should want.
So Caverly, tell us a little bit about your role at JP Morgan and how maybe some of this is impacting you as an investor client.
So we are, just to set the stage, we're equity investors in real estate. So we're not the operators. About 75% of our portfolio is operated by our general partner. And so our goal is to have high quality, well-managed real estate. And so in our position, we encourage the adoption of improved technology, not necessarily bleeding edge, but we want to make our tenants happy. And if that means adopting better tools for our building operators, building managers, we're all for it.
So how do you see a tool or a measurement such as GRESB impacting JP Morgan, your portfolio? How is that helping kind of define value to you as an investor?
GRESB is the Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark, and that is a way that we assess our entire portfolio. And what it's great for is helping us understand what are the questions we should be asking, and gives us a sense of how are our peer group attacking these issues as well, whether it's fully automated data collection for our energy and water information, or public health initiatives. Does everybody actually have a fitness center in their building? or other ways to engage the tenants. So it's a combination thereof. And having a benchmark is really helpful for understanding where the trends are going, because sometimes you come to a forum like this and you feel like we're way behind because we haven't adopted every new technology out there. And you realize it's a process. It's not a goal, it's a process, and we just keep chipping away to make things better.
So, Greg, I remember when I used to manage office buildings, we still had plastic directory strips that had to be ordered, and so we've come a very long way in the last 25 years in terms of digitization of real estate. And we talked about all this data, and everything's now data-driven. How is JLL changing as a company to really embrace, not only for JLL, but for your clients?
I think Kevin nailed it, and John too. We used to take data and dump it, and now we're bringing it together, and it's really about the data scientists and the insights we can provide from that data. So integrating wherever you are, because there's a spectrum, right? There's complete bleeding edge, maybe the edge, and then wherever we're going from there. And then there's what I have, and how can I take that data and provide insights that actually work for that tenant or for that owner? And that means it's really broad. We have some clients that are part of what we manage is technology. And Doug Sharp and I were talking this morning. One of our big clients is Amazon. And we do many of their large distribution facilities. And we manage some people in facilities management, and we have data that tells us about the building, but the buildings are boxes. They're actually, 1.5 million packages go through this one facility in Seattle. And we have 40 people, and all they do is they manage the robots. And the robots go and pick the different things to really drive efficiency in that building. And the data and analytics that come out of that are incredible. So Amazon has decided that actually managing that looks closer to facilities to them than technology. So now the robots are just part of facilities at the end of the day. But the data and the uptime and all of that, now we're inside the yellow line, and we're in and actually helping the client with the business of their business. And now it's totally changed, the relationship from being a real estate services outsourcer to being an absolutely critical supply chain partner to them. And that all starts with your ability to look at data, to think about it in different ways, and to bring on new skill sets that are very different. I don't think we had any robot technicians probably 3 or 4 years ago. And now it's hundreds. And that's an example of other things we'll do in the commercial office space. There'll be other examples as well.
So ultimately, all of this comes down to what are the business drivers, right? Not only for our clients, but for us as a real estate firm. We have several different interests represented here: government, investor, owner, manager, management company. Let's talk a little bit about what are the business drivers. So, John, I'm going to start with you. Large real estate owner, manager in New York City. What are your business drivers? What is driving you to adopt smart technologies, all of this data? What are your primary drivers there?
Money. We don't do anything unless it saves us money or makes us money. We are capitalists. We've got one rule at Rudin: you can kid around about anything except money. So it's really focused on, and the human experience. What is our business, right? Our business used to be, it still is, find a piece of dirt, dig a hole, pour a foundation, set steel and glass, fill it up, send out rent bills. What we do now is we collect data, we remember that data, we learn from that data, and then we share it with our customers as quickly as we possibly can. That data that we collect and we analyze and that we ultimately use to predict and prescribe today and tomorrow's activities must be shared with our customers. What everybody is agreed upon one thing, which is what buildings need are an operating system. They need a centralized operating system, an integrated platform that takes data from disparate systems, combines that, creates new correlated relationships, and ultimately drives efficiency. In the energy curve in our buildings looks like a double-humped camel. And why, where a typical building has a very long and large peak. Ours is different, is we're actually taking occupancy data, correlating that with fan speed, so that as people go to lunch, We modulate fan speed. This is all automated. Modulate fan speed. That divot in the middle of the day in a single building can equate up to almost a megawatt of power for 2 hours in the middle of the day. Now, what does that do for us? It enables new technologies. If you're looking at battery storage or some type of thermal storage, I take electricity, cheap electricity from the night before, I charge batteries. That big, long, old peak that I used to have, I can't shave that peak. I need a battery as big as this room to do that. But if I've got that double hump Camel, beautiful. Shave it in the morning, shut it off at lunch, shave the afternoon. I've just totally reshaped my demand curve with cheap electricity. For us, the system that we created, and we went out and looked for the system, couldn't find it. A lot of good little pieces, but we wanted this platform. We wanted this integrated platform. Couldn't find it, had to build it ourselves. Today, it's saving us 50 cents a foot. Across our 10 million square foot commercial portfolio, $5 million this year. Throw a 5 cap on that, that's $100 million in value that we even created for the family across that portfolio. That's money. And that's what it's also done on the human side. It's cut our hot and cold calls by 80%. Because we see the trend, we see temperatures going out of a range. Before that customer feels discomfort, geez, it's a little hot or cold in here, boom, engineer sees it because it's in his hip pocket. It's mobile. So this is a tool that we've developed. It's built by people who run buildings for people who run buildings.
So I have a feeling that the answer is going to be fairly consistent across the panel for this one, but Caverly, I'm going to ask, what are your business drivers for green, sustainable, smart buildings?
Building on John's answer, all that behind the scenes work is the driver. The tenants are happier. They feel the proactive maintenance of their building, even though they may not care about the technology of how it happens. And that's the driver. You want to keep the tenants happy. You want them to renew. You don't want to deal with the tenant dissatisfaction. And that's what you get if you are not proactively maintaining the building.
So Kevin, again, there's a difference between money and value. And so how, we talked about the 330, 300. So in terms of ROI, how do you define ROI? How do you define value? We talk about the worker productivity, the human experience piece of it kind of being more of one of those soft, and I know that Joe Allen's going to talk a little bit more about that at lunch. But how do you define ROI and value, and what are your business drivers?
Well, I think it's worth remembering that GSA only exists to serve the missions of the other federal agencies who are housed in the buildings. And that gives us two really unique perspectives. One, we understand at a very profound and fundamental level that buildings only exist to support the work of the people in them. They don't exist to be nice little objects that run really effectively. Any building manager would tell you can run it really, really inexpensively if you just kick all the people out. That doesn't work. So for us, we do, just like everybody else, a pure economic ROI on every investment we make. But we also look at very strongly how is that affected? How is that going to improve the working conditions of the people there? And we're incorporating those as well as the risk of emission failure. So we're really, we may choose to have greater redundancy in building systems than a pure ROI would tell you if you have a mission critical Department of Homeland Security operation or FBI operation like that. All of our buildings have profit and loss statements. I mean, we really manage exactly on a private sector basis and knowing that well. And frankly, we make our investment decisions exactly the way John does. Do we see the value? Do we see the return? And how do we measure that? Just the same way as anyone else. The soft issue about productivity, I think people have a tendency to disbelieve productivity numbers because of the 330, 300. The scale seems wrong to most business managers. You say, if I do this with carbon dioxide, which Joe Allen's going to talk about, I can change your productivity by, let's say, 3%, which will give you a 3,000% return on investment. Ha, ha, ha. Nobody believes 3,000%, even though you can show it to them financially and everything else. So I think that's the problem that we face. Very, very small incremental investments give you very, very large payback. but people are intuitively seeing that in different ways in the workplace, because they see how people work differently. They see the value of collaboration. And so what we do generally is we sort of focus on how are we organizing the workplace to support the work, which is why, as Greg mentioned, you really have to know the business of your client in the building. Because if you don't know that, then you can't design the space in a way that's really effective.
So how do you prove it? I know that GSA's done some studies on some of your buildings to really prove in dollars and cents the value of high performance buildings. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, yes. I mean, we have two really cool data sets. One, we made a commitment to the American taxpayer at the beginning of the Recovery Act that we would measure the results of that significant investment in improving buildings. And we did over 400 individual projects to improve energy efficiency, water efficiency, and the efficiency of the building themselves. Right now, those buildings are saving $68 million a year in that group of 400 buildings. They're operating 22% more effectively than their baseline. And because of the drive of the project managers, the average building exceeded their target by 7%. So better performance there. And then we recently completed a study, which is a really neat statistical comparison of 206 buildings. 103 that meet our definition for high performance buildings, and 103 legacy stock buildings that haven't gotten the approval. The high performance buildings, 19% greater energy efficiency, 23% greater water efficiency, less water consumption, 16% lower operating expenses, and 21% less waste going to the landfill, and 9% better tenant satisfaction. And if, just in this one thing, if we were to miraculously make the same investments in those other 103 buildings, we would save $71 million a year. So that's the kind of statistics that we're showing. We'll be publishing this report probably about the end of May. And it's nice because these buildings are matched by size, by geography, by tenant type, all of that. So it's a nice matched set comparison building.
That's fantastic. So Caverly, again, we talk about the 330, 300, but for some reason, a lot of owners still go back to just what's the ROI on energy savings, and because that's something tangible. So my question to you is, how do we start to change that discussion, especially as an investor client where the primary goal here is to make sure that you're attracting the right tenants, that you're making those tenants happy. How do we start to change that conversation and redefine the value?
So the big challenge, and I've said this to many brokers directly, is that, our tenants only go through a transaction every 5 or 10 years. They are not really focused on all these other things that we live and breathe every day about higher quality buildings, better operations. They're looking at the bottom line. What is it going to cost me to occupy this space? And having that conversation shift from what does it cost me to what are the benefits of this space are challenging. They see what the lobby looks like. Great, it's beautiful. They see the fitness center. They think, all right, my employees are going to be happier. But do they translate that into value? And do they actually care what their energy bill is going to be at the end of the day? So trying to have a more complete conversation is the ongoing dilemma. But on the lobby looks better, great. We also put in energy efficient light fixtures when we redid it. The bathrooms look great. We put in water saving fixtures when that renovation was complete. So the ROI on any of these are really hard to calculate because you're doing all these projects, and every time you do any kind of improvement or even just your daily decision making and operating the building, you are incorporating new technology, new thoughts on how to make the energy savings. And so when I try and calculate ROI on our projects, I look at the whole thing. It's not a project by project basis. It's over the past 10 years, at this building, we reduced energy consumption by 20%. And what is our entire capital spend? We put a new roof on, that added insulation. We repointed the facade, and we did lighting retrofits. all those come in. And even when you take the full capital spend, it's a 20% ROI, but you can't do it project by project.
You know what's interesting, Darlene, if I could jump in on this one, because we've got a slightly different experience with a major tenant of ours, a small company called BlackRock. I think last count they had $5 trillion of assets. So they have 16 floors in one of our buildings. And I think one of the issues that we're struggling here with is the visualization of the data that Cavalry's talking about. What we went to BlackRock and we said, listen, what we're going to do is take what we're doing on a building-wide basis, and we're going to slice the building into floor by floor. So your portfolio, your 16 floors, is now suddenly going to be visualized. You're going to see your consumption data. You're going to understand it in real time. We're going to show you your space utilization on a floor-by-floor basis. And guess what happened? They came back to us. First thing that happened, we saved them 40% with variable speed drives. We saved them another 13% by correlating the occupancy data against that. They came back and said, kind of sheepishly, we bargained hard when we came into this building. We wanted temperatures from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. But the occupancy data that you're showing us shows that people aren't showing up until 8:45. So why are you giving me conditioned air that's on my meter so early? I'm like, well, your broker could have been a JLL person.
Or at least said,
bargained hard for that, right? I got to have it, but now they don't want it.
Well, and they want
the
Saturday
savings.
hours, but now everybody works remotely, so they don't need to come in.
Exactly. So suddenly the conversation, because we're able to visualize the data, show you in real time what the impact is by using tools like Nantum, now suddenly people are changing their thought process.
Because
But
it's all
that's
that
the
data.
sophisticated tenant. There are so many smaller tenants out there who just don't have that level of understanding and engagement. They see big dollars, but when you're looking at a smaller tenant, and so much of our real estate is small tenants.
I can deliver that to a 5,000 square foot tenant or a 150,000 square foot tenant.
So Greg, what's the obligation then, even from JLL's perspective, to be able to educate the tenants, their investor clients, their corporate clients? How do you help change the conversation with your clients?
Let me start with the conversation that's changing. So when you go into the boardrooms, and there's a whole bunch of human behavior here. Remember how cars were getting smaller and gas was really expensive, then gas became cheaper and cars got bigger, right? We all thought that was where we needed to go. We need to be, gasoline efficient, energy efficient. I don't think that's going to shift in buildings because it does get to ROI for the owners and others. What the discussions are, as we get into the boardroom, especially at a time like now when the labor markets are extremely tight, I don't want to guess what inning we're in, but we're deep into a game of economic expansion here in the United States, and there's a lot of pressure on talent. Does anybody in this room, inside of their organization, not have some pressure on talent, particularly the highly specialized talent? So what folks are doing, and the pressure now that's a CFO, CEO discussion. What can I do to differentiate, to make sure I lower attrition, and that I can maximize people wanting to come here? And somebody mentioned before, I think it was Stacy, at the Edge, 4 times as many applications for people in that building. If your biggest problem is, I can't get talent to move my business forward, then you're looking at every lever. One lever is, I can change compensation. Well, that gets to your business models very quickly, and while those things have shifted, the one place that a lot of the companies on the edge can go is to go to their facility. So we provide them with a broad range of options and tools and toolkits. Many of them are things that you all do. And then we try to figure out where they want to be on that spectrum. And for them, it's an individual choice. Will I pay more for a gold or a platinum LEED building? The answer is, because of social responsibility and the demographics of the people that some are hiring, that's extremely important. So does it make ROI sense to make some of those decisions? No. Does it allow you to separate with a very important critical resource like people? It may. And the motivation of each client's a little different, but we are hearing from all of them, and it's why we're talking so much about human experience, that talent and retention and nurturing of talent is more important than it's ever been. Will we get returns Kevin, I think we will, and I think we do when people make it, but they're making the investments now because they have to. And often that's how capital allocation goes in the boardroom.
Yeah, I think there's one other point to make too, is that as the workforce is changing, as we've sort of alluded to here, the way we design space for people to work is very, very different than it was traditionally with offices, and people have mentioned that. What we found is the modern workplace costs less to build out, to make, because you don't use as much space. And
it's more flexible.
You think energy is expensive. A square foot is a lot more expensive than the energy per square foot. And so, GSA's headquarters, we moved 2,300 people out after the renovation. We moved 4,000 people in. We saved $24 million a year in avoided rent costs. $24 million a year dwarfs the energy savings.
Well, it's funny, we always joke that, you work 25 years to get to the corner office, and it's not there anymore.
No.
So we have the future of work. The workplace itself is changing. So let's talk about that a little bit, because when you talk about human experience, people live on their cell phones, right? People live on mobile apps on their cell phones. I can leave the house without my wallet, and I can survive. If I leave the house without my cell phone, I'm lost. So people are used to booking seats on an airplane on their cell phone, picking their hotel rooms, going to the movies and picking a seat, having real-time information through their cell phone. And then you get in your car and you've got your GPS and you've got Wi-Fi, and it tells you exactly how to get to your building, and you've got all of these features and functionality and convenience on your phone. And as soon as you step foot in the building, that's gone. And so I think people are looking for that. How do we do that same convenience and technology that we're used to in the palm of our hand outside the building and bring that inside the building? Because that's what consumers are asking for, whether it's corporate or government or investor clients. So let's talk a little bit about the workplace and how the workplace is changing. How do we support that new workforce, that new mobile worker with apps and the ability to control your lights over your cell phone and book a room and all that? So Kevin, are you thinking about that at GSA, and how are you using the physical systems and the interaction between the occupant and the building to change your workplace at GSA?
Well, John talked about it, Greg talked about it, Carolee talked about it. It's all about using the data that you have that's going on in the building. We have changed our thinking about occupancy sensors in rooms. We use that to know when people are there, but we don't use it to turn on the lights. People can find a switch. We just use vacancy sensors because we want the lights to go out when they leave, because they'll forget to turn the lights off. So little changes like that. It's really understanding behavioral economics in a really different way. You talk about the difficulty of getting people to accept change. If you frame the change as you're losing this, people won't move. But you have to frame the change as not a sense of loss, but as a sense of, what is the benefit that's coming out of it. What we've found is a ubiquity of small meeting rooms, places to go. What we're beginning to find from some of the measurements is that in the modern workplace, people move around a lot, which is healthier. In the modern workplace, people get better light. That light aligns better with the circadian system, which gives people, in the same amount of time, better quality sleep. Better quality sleep gives you a more alert worker the next day. Those things have real bottom line effects. So, and when you start doing that, when you start opening up the space, when you start removing the barriers between people, ironically, when you take those barriers down, the sound levels in open space are lower than in cubicle space. We measure this over and over again. And that also, ironically, makes the distraction of loud people even worse. So you have to give them a place to go, and you have to sort of change the way people work that way. But it is working phenomenally well in the places we're doing it. And so, and the amount of savings that you get from the modern workplace is really extraordinary. It changes, that's an ROI that you can measure. And it's huge.
So for JP Morgan, are you seeing this as an impact on your real estate? And how do you respond to the needs of the occupants of the buildings that are now very mobile and very high tech?
Well, as I said, most tenants only revisit their space needs every 5 to 10 years. So it is part of the education process. If you have a company that's still in a lot of hard wall office space and you want to keep them, it's really important to show them another floor in that same building where that transformation has already taken place, whether it's a spec suite that you've built out, because you want them to be happy, but you also recognize that they have changing space needs. So it's a lot of education.
Well, I think it's also a different, as we move towards the traditional, the investor client hasn't in the past really gotten involved in the technology applications for the tenants. Well, now we're kind of blending that in terms of, what can we provide as base building features and security and access control through mobile devices, and how is that kind of blending now between the ability to control base building systems and the happiness of the tenants in that space, because now they're starting to interact with what was traditionally not their space.
I haven't seen that in our space. I know people talk about it. I think there's still a privacy concern of how much information am I giving away either to my employer or to my building. Change is slow, particularly for people over 40. It's a little bit hard to, give up your work provided device and now integrate it into your personal device. I'm more accustomed to a bit more delineation between work and private space. So I don't see as rapid adoption of those changes. I'm sure John has a lot more in his portfolio.
Well, that's a great segue in terms of data and this collection of data and what is personal data and who owns the data, who has access to the data, what are we doing with the data? So John, do you want to address that a little bit in terms of this concern about, who's where, when, and Big Brother watching and where the data goes?
Sure, and I want to just reiterate something that you said. This is the key to everything, right? I flew down from New York this morning. I just showed that. There's my barcode. I'm on the plane. That's my access in. Why shouldn't we be able to do that in a building? So we're really focused on taking that experience right down to the desk. We will have an app. It's being built right now. Matt Stetson is here from our team that's building it. It will security authentication, emergency contact, visitor management. You can vote on whether you're hot, cold, or indifferent. And it will all basically integrate back to the gateway, the building-wide gateway that ultimately runs Nantum within our buildings. That, we believe, is the future. That's what BlackRock is focused on, and we will bring it to other tenants throughout. There are, our test case in terms of what they want. Because listening to what your tenants want, wow, something, wild and crazy is that, but that's ultimately what creates success. If you're not delivering the product to your customer and giving to them what they want, they will leave your building, and that's bad. We used to say that we're a real estate company that dabbled in technology. We're now a technology company that dabbles in real estate. We look at everything, a rent bill, a hot and cold call complaint, a workflow. It's all data. And if it's not integrated into a single platform, it can't be, I got insurance over here, I got water over here, I got energy over here, and I've got to go each of those stops. It has to be on a single frame. Right now, I know exactly how many people are in the Rudin portfolio in the city of New York right on this iPad. Roughly, it's 22,000 people. I know that right now we're cooking at about 21 megawatts of power. Very interesting correlation. Where literally each of us is a 100-watt light bulb. We give off heat. When we leave this building, that heat load goes. Why am I pushing this volumetric conditioned air to an empty room? The building should know that, and it should be automatic that we can modulate those fans down. That saves a lot of energy. So in terms of this, we like to say that we're bringing sexy back to building operations, but it was never sexy.
That's right.
So our operating engineers, will argue with me over that one. But it's really about understanding, oh my God, each of us can influence what's going on in this space if we can give immediate real-time feedback.
So to that point, Greg, John mentioned that they're now a technology company dabbling in real estate. How is JLL changing? Do you see JLL as a real estate company, a technology company? And further to that, what are you doing in terms of investing in technology, smart buildings, to be able to meet these needs of your clients in the future?
I think John saw some recent speeches our senior executives have given, because we talked about it the same way. You know, I like to talk about it as we were an analog company, you know, even though some of it was automated. And then we've actually bought, built, and then partnered with technology elements. And our goal is to get to that balance where we're still great at the things that we've always done, but some of them are wrapped in technology, and the data and analytics part will be a whole separate area. We have an entire data science department. All they do is help us get our data, store our data, and then look at how we can come up with insights for our clients. To your who owns the data question, our clients own the data. And we're very clear about how that goes. What we get from our clients, and is a quid pro quo with them to show them benchmarking and other things, is the right to anonymize their data and really to build some broader perspectives around what that looks like. I want to go back to something John said, though. So here's a top-notch developer, owner, operator, and they're thinking about technology as they should, from how do I bring it to the building to my tenants. So our largest tenants, who are in all of your buildings and around, they're coming to us and saying, how do we build the applications? Because this is the portal, the phone. How do I build those applications? But their thought is maybe coming from a different end of the spectrum. How do I connect my people? How do I optimize use of conference rooms? It's a little bit about their space, how they choose to collaborate. But then ultimately, somebody's responsible for it. Often these are owner-occupied buildings. They want to go back and do a lot of the same things that you're doing. So I see the future, and we're working on a number of these. There'll be an end-to-end spectrum. There'll be a product. It's relatively inefficient for each individual owner to do it, but it's leading today. At some point, there'll be a product that'll be broader, where you can bring all that information together, from using Corrigo, which automates our IFM process and data and work orders, all the way through certainly security and access, amenities, specials going on with the retail in the building. Maybe I want to book a conference room, all the way to social connection, where you can connect with people in a group on your building, which all of that brings to a sense of a better, more efficient, experience. That doesn't exist today. I think there'll be the innovative owners will go there, the biggest occupiers will go there, and eventually these will come together where it's a broader spectrum.
We need to talk.
But I think it's a real process, because all that information is to provide feedback to the occupants in the building and the people managing the building. It's never going to be a fully automated process to run the building. You have people there, and they need that human interaction. And sometimes the systems need to be overridden. And if it's not intuitive to the people running the building, they're going to shut it off. And it's silly things like an automated lighting system, and then you have an evening event in space that's normally closed at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and the lights keep going off. That's a failure, because it's not easy for somebody to go and figure out, how do I override for just a few hours? So if it works well, it's fabulous, but so many of these transformations are an iterative process, and not that many tenants are willing to be the guinea pig as you work through those bugs. And upsetting your tenants means they're not going to renew.
Well, let's also address it in that same point. How is the skill set changing then in the buildings, in terms of people who are running the buildings, operating the buildings, managing the buildings? Because now we're seeing this transformation from sort of the traditional MEP operations roles over to IT. And a huge overlay of IT when you're putting smart networks in buildings and connecting everything and running everything over software and a computer network. So how are you addressing this skill set that's now required to run those buildings?
I think before we leave the one point, I think you touched on something we haven't mentioned yet. People aren't coming to the buildings the way they used to. They're coming for the human connection. Mm-hmm. They're coming when they need to work face-to-face with people. which is a very different way of coming to work, which means that the systems have to change to support that kind of activity. And that's, I think, the missing component. I just didn't want to leave that point.
That's big. There was a great article that was written years ago, 1995, 96, that the headline was, "There are no water coolers in cyberspace." We were all going to head to the mountains of Montana and Colorado, and we could all, communicate. Well, guess what? Ever since the internet was created, we've had an amazing renaissance in the urban experience.
Yes.
Look at every major city across the United States, across the world, because people want to be there. They want that human touch. They want that human experience. They want to share what they've created, and it's hard to do that from the mountaintop of Glacier National Park, Montana. So,
Plus the wireless, not so good.
But they still need the mobility. But they still need, so what you're saying then is, yes, everyone's coming back to the workplace, but the workplace is different. And it has to be flexible and mobile
100%.
and support all of the technologies that a lot of them may even have in their homes. I mean, our homes are more automated than our offices are at this
How
point.
does WeWork have a greater market cap than Boston Properties, the largest REIT that exists? How is that possible? They're a major customer of ours. We're building a new building in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. They're taking a third of the building. They're probably going to end up taking the whole thing. Why? Because it's that human experience. People want to be around other creative people. But Darlene, your point in terms of how do we get IT with OT together, right? How do you get, a smart IT guy walking in the engine room or woman walking in the engine room and say, "I got the greatest tool for you to help run this building." That operating engineer is going to go, "Get the hell out of here. You're not, this is my domain," right?
Yeah.
Well, what we did was we brought them together. It's the product we created is 300 years. The top 8 people that work for us have more than 300 years experience running buildings. We brought them together with some really smart data scientists, and we said, guess what? It's time for a group hug, because they're going to teach you stuff, and they're going to teach you stuff. And that's what built the product.
Yeah, we were in a visioning session with a client, and they asked us for a specific feature. So can you dim the lights in the conference room 5 minutes before the meeting's over to notify the next group, that your time is up and there's another group coming in? And my answer was yes, absolutely. I didn't even bat an eye. And we walked out of the room, my engineers were like, "How the hell are you going to do that?" And my response was, it's an if-then statement, right? And so when you overlay IT on top of operations, you start to pull all these things together and start to put that sequence of intelligence in the buildings. Because when you look at them now, we've got individual systems that may have some level of smart in them. But if you don't start pulling them all together in a seamless, holistic manner, they don't have intelligence. You aren't able to feed up to that level of business intelligence that our clients are looking for. So, Greg, on the topic of business intelligence, once you've got all this data and you've got the visualization of the data, how does that business intelligence now help not only JLL but your clients?
It's amazing for our clients that are on the edge of this. So take an HSBC or clients like that. What that intelligence has allowed us to do, where we might meet with their CFO or even CEO once in a while, we're a big strategic partner. They want us to sit with them and have a dialogue over what we're seeing not only there, but with others. How can we go to the next level? This is now telling me I can do these 3 things, because now they have complete visualization and synthesis of a lot of information. And it's facts, not innuendo of where things are. So our goal as an advisor is to continue to move up into the boardroom to the extent that we can. And the right insights and being at the edge of that really allows us to do that. Then getting that feedback allows us to get to implementable, real solutions for our clients. So that part's been a great journey. You learn from each one of the clients, and having a portfolio of 300-400 large global outsource clients, and then 1,000 other clients that have portfolios that are smaller or maybe don't use our full range of services, lets us see a lot of different things. And that's a big value for us with our investor clients. What's the perspective of the tenant, and also what's bleeding edge on the building side, but also with each individual client. So it's been learning to bring or to make sure you have in your meeting that technology person, that data scientist, when you thought it was a meeting about one of your functional areas. We just came from our executive committee meeting, and a third of the room were folks from companies we bought that are digital natives talking about our analog business, because we're on that journey to get to a balance first and then to become a little more technology oriented, and we're not going to get there.
That's a technology company talking, not a real estate company talking. Mm-hmm. Every pattern that he sees with those 200 or 300 conversations across the world, if those suddenly you start hearing commonalities, boom, go do it.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about what's next. So Kevin, and I know there's a lot of different levels of maturity, not only on the panel, but in the room in terms of adoption of smart building technologies and data and analytics and business intelligence and all these things that you're going to hear about throughout the conference today. So Kevin, I know that you've implemented a lot of features and functionality for high performance, energy efficient buildings. What's next for you?
I hope that it's user control. A greater integration of the user individually controlling how the building works for them. We have done a few studies of that. The greater the user control, the less you have a consumption of resources and you have a higher satisfaction of it. Make the building work for that. And that integrates the user into the operations of the building. In our most highly automated buildings, we have such a depth of detail that there's this interaction between building operations and the tenants that makes a much, much more harmonious place to work. And I think that the second thing that's coming, we talk about data analytics and getting the data professionals in there. I think we will begin to realize that machine learning, which is not ubiquitous by any stretch of the imagination, will start letting machine learning teach us things that we're actually not imagining, because we are bounded by our belief systems about what the relationships are in buildings. And machine learning, the machine doesn't actually have that kind of limiting background. So that all of a sudden we'll find things that we actually don't know that are going on in the building, those relationships. I think that's going to be really, really fascinating. And it only works on big data.
Carolee, what's next for JP Morgan?
I think continuing to work with high-quality operators like Rudin in pushing the initiatives forward and pushing them across the broad spectrum of our buildings, some of which have a long way to go. As I said, we're not bleeding edge, but this is all best practices, and we just need a broader adoption of them across the building spectrum.
Absolutely. John?
Well, buildings have always had a heart. Engine room, boiler room. They now have a brain. They actually now have something that can remember and learn. We think the final frontier is, what's the central nervous system? How many sensors? What type of sensors? Wired, wireless, we think both. And then how do we, exactly what Kevin said, how do we take that data and bring it to that individual sitting in that desk? You touched a minute before on security and privacy. We were very concerned about that. We went to one of our largest customers that we're also working with in developing the Fractal, and they said, we don't care about privacy. Our employees don't care about privacy. And we're like, really? Why? Well, we're in a hot desk environment. And everybody, if you're there 80% of the time, you get to pick your desk permanently. So they actually had people showing up, hitting their phone, I'm here, and then taking off. So they caught that guy, they fired him. But they need to know who you are, when you're there, why you're there, and for how long. So we're like, privacy, schmivacy. That is really where people want to know, they want to be counted. So maybe there's issues, in some cases, but in many cases where we thought it was going to be an issue, it's not. So we think central nervous system, bringing it exactly what was just said, bringing it to that individual employee, making them happy, that makes the people around them happy, that makes the company want to stay with us forever.
So Greg, in addition to investing in your new smart building program, what's next for JLL?
Run by Darlene Pope.
The new smart building program would be number one. I think the other panelists said many of the things I would say, but what I just want to talk about for 1 second is what's in our way. because it seems like as we get to people who adopt this the right way and align it with their strategy, people that are on the forefront, that there are really great benefits. So what's in the way? And it's human beings and change management. So we're spending a lot of time. We have a lot of initiatives. I'm sure every company here does. Changing the systems we're on and others so we can see better, more transparent data, more consistent, customized to the individual, as Kevin said. And the challenge is it's the classic adoption curve, right? We're going to get a lot of early adopters, and those were your early clients for the folks in this room. And then how do we get more people through it? The more examples we get, the more momentum that we get in certain areas, but there's a wide range of things that can come, and what you have to have are leaders that are really willing to be open, and then you have to help them and their organizations through the change management. We're going through it. Going from analog to digital it's a great journey, but it's painful. And for some people, they really pine for the time when they had that corner office. Remember when we were growing, business was growing very quickly here in DC, and I was running the business, so I'd take my kids to work. Took my youngest son one time, he was probably 7, and he had seen 3 or 4 offices, and he knew, run to the corner, that's Dad's office, right? So it's, it was a status symbol. And he came in right after we had changed, and we went to really open space, and I now had an office that was inside, it had a sliding door, and he runs to the corner, and there are pictures of other children. And he's like, "Oh my gosh, Dad, this is your spot, right?" I said, "No, that's one of the team. Dad's over here." So he walks into the inside, sliding door, glass enclosed office, and he looks around. He looks at me and he says, "Does Mom know?" That was big change management. For all of us, these technologies and other things are going to be ways to think, synthesize information, and we've all established that at one point fairly recently, we were dumping all this data. Now we have to figure out how to get to those insights. Then people have to embrace them, and then things like machine learning will help us get better and better at it. But it's not going to be, it's all here, everybody's going to start doing it. There'll be the early adopters will move right down that curve. And the thing that we all need to do, if you're an owner for your tenants, is you need to help them down that curve so they see the value of the things and the individual products or services that some of you have.
Great. Well, I think what we've heard from our panelists today is that this isn't just the future. The future is now. When we talk about reimagining, these are the people who are actually implementing. So the future is today. These discussions are real. These features, functionality, solutions, smart buildings are real. So I really encourage you to spend the rest of the day. Please take advantage of as many educational sessions as you can. Network, learn from each other, collaborate, because collectively we have been raising the bar for this industry for many, many years. I think the future is very bright in terms of the impact of technology and data and analytics. And again, the future is today. Future is now. Reimagine, and I want to thank our panelists for the excellent conversation. So if you join me thanking the panelists, and then enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you.